Hey everybody, QiWiz here. I'm out in the woods just hiking for the day and thought I would bring my FireFly and make my lunch in a little bit. I'm out on trail in our North Chagrin Reservation, which is in northeast Ohio. Our snow has melted, so the trail's a little bit muddy, but it's just above freezing, so a lot of the mud is still frozen. So even though I'm a little concerned, my trail runners are still staying dry. So anyway, I'm just hiking along, and we're going to talk a little bit about finding wood for a fire as well. So the North Chagrin Reservation actually has quite a few trails, none of them that long, but a lot of options. Here's a trail sign showing you how many different trails there are. And there are some streams and a few ravines as well. And so it's a very pleasant area to hike with some variety. There's even a section of Buckeye Trail that's a few miles long that goes through it with the blue blazes. Not much wildlife today, but I did see a couple of pileated woodpeckers along the way. So I mentioned we were going to talk about finding wood and starting fires in the FireFly. And so the first thing I want to do is talk about how you would find the best kind of wood, maybe after a rain had come through your area a day or two ago, or even the same day. So what you're looking for are sticks or branches that have fallen but are not on the ground. So they may be partly resting on the ground but in the air, like this one. Or they could even be hanging from branches like this one. But basically, those will have a chance to air dry and drip dry much better, and that's what you want to get a fire started. So here's another example of the kind of stick that you're looking for, which is propped up leaning against another tree, and actually that might even be enough for one fire, just that particular stick. Okay, so what I've done is about maybe 5 minutes before I was going to stop for lunch, I started to look for good wood right by the side of the trail, the type I was talking about, and here's what I've gathered. You know, if I were hiking into camp, this would be enough for a dinner and a breakfast the next morning. I could keep the wood that I don't need for dinner dry under my tarp and be all set for breakfast. But in any event, this is plenty for me to have for lunch. So let me get set up to do that. Okay, I've got the FireFly on its windshield, and I've got the flex port open in case I want to use some of the longer twigs. And here's what I'm going to use as a fire starter. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with Esbit, but an Esbit tab only weighs a half an ounce, and you can cut it up into quarters, or break it up into quarters. And so each quarter of an Esbit tab is, I don't know, not very heavy, and makes a great fire starter. So that'll go on top of the wood that's in the bottom of the FireFly, and then I'll build a little fire over that as it gets going to create a top fire. Okay, so the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to light it through the flex port side. And once the cube is lit, then I'm going to move it a little bit to be in the center of the stove. And I've got some little twigs to help get my top fire going. So I'm just going to break those up. And this isn't really that precise an operation, but essentially a fire needs fuel and air to get going. So you want your twigs to be a little bit loose, not too densely packed. And once you've got some small stuff going, then you can add bigger stuff. Now this isn't perfectly dry wood. We had some rain a couple of days ago. It's probably been 36 or 48 hours since we had any rain. So with the way that I picked the wood to use, this actually is working just fine as far as getting a fire started. If you really had really wet woods, I would use a bottom lighting technique, which we might talk about at some point. And you can even use a small knife to scrape wet bark off your twigs if it's really bad. But we'll let that get going. So while that gets going, I'm just going to get my water ready in my pot. And as I've mentioned in a couple of places, I do have a dedicated pot for the FireFly. So I'm putting in a couple cups of water, maybe a little bit more. I kind of like my stuff soupy. And I could even put that on the FireFly right now. So maybe I'll go ahead and do that. Sometimes it's good to wait till it gets going a little bit better, but that's going pretty well. So while the fire is going, I'm just going to get my food out. I have a kind of a Norse meal with some added peas and freeze-dried chicken to go into it. So here's what I'm having. It's a chicken and rice meal that I've got some dehydrated, actually freeze-dried peas and chicken to add to it. So I've gone ahead and put my chicken and peas in. I like to give them a little bit of extra time. And once the water boils, which is going to happen pretty soon now, I'm going to go ahead and put the rice in, give it a stir, and then put it into my pot cozy. I use one of these Reflectix pot cozies so that it replaces the simmer step. I don't have food burning on the bottom of my pot, and it also helps keep any soot off the contents of my pack. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add my rice now. Give that a bit of a stir. And then just put it in my cozy to finish cooking. The final ingredient is some olive oil. This is what I use, or these not quite half-ounce packets you can get. I'll just mention I still have all this wood left, which would be plenty actually for dinner and breakfast tomorrow. Okay, so let's see what we have. Can ring the dinner bell. Smells good. Just what I need out on trail on a cold winter day. You have a great time next time you're out on trail. I know I will. And think about some twig fire cooking. You'll have fun with it, and you'll improve your fire skills too. Take care, be well. This is QiWiz signing out. Almost forgot to talk about bottom lighting. The first step in bottom lighting is pick out your fire starter and put it right in the middle of the stove at the bottom, because you're going to be lighting it from underneath. Here I show the 1/4 Esbit tab, But if the wood were really wet, you might want to use a half an esbit or a full esbit or a full cotton ball with Vaseline in it or paraffin in it, or whatever kind of fire starter would give you a flame for a while to get damp twigs lit so that then they can dry out the rest of the wood. Once you've got your fire starter in place, you're going to put small twigs around it in a teepee form, and that way when you light it, it'll already be set up as a teepee. And you're going to see me do that in a minute. Okay, so I've got the FireFly out here. It's on a picnic table. Got a little grass underneath the windshield so that the picnic table doesn't get a scorch mark. And just going to do the bottom lighting. So there's my little esbit cube. So I'm just going to put the lighter under that. And the whole idea of this is that you're using the FireFly closed up with the flex port door closed so that you get the maximum chimney effect, air coming in under the fire and coming up through your wood. You'll notice even with wood that's not that wet that I've got today, I'm getting more smoke with this technique. But if your wood is borderline, this is the way to go. This will get your fire going when a top lighting technique will just be quite difficult. And you can see once the cube catches and the draft starts going up, it gets going pretty good. And what you would do with this is then you would start, with it gets going something like it is now, to feed in wood from the top to add some additional fuel to the fire before you're ready to cook. So that's a bottom lighting fire technique, and I hope that's helpful as you get out and try your own twig stove techniques.